Hey guys! Hello and welcome back to Monday Night Mythbusters. I'm Dr. Carolyn George from Vita Integrative Medicine and Leslie Harrington, Transformational Coach.
Hey guys!
Welcome back. We're very happy to see people diving in and joining us on this very interesting topic. There is a little bit of controversy surrounding it, but not too much. But I think it's an area that a lot of people don't really understand.
I think it's something that people don't take a really initiative to understand, and I think it's important to understand it.
Right.
But then I think there's a lot of people that maybe just go with the whole here's your statin drug and move on, and they do this preventative and things like that. I think it's important to understand what's really high cholesterol, what's not really so high, and when you should consider trying to make lifestyle changes before you would consider taking a medication and things like that.
Right, exactly, all those things. So hi Nick and Marianne and Brian and Rosie and Sally and Percy.
Hey Percy.
Awesome.
I saw Sally on there. Hey,
Yeah,
Marianne.
Sally. So we've got some interest. So guys, as I'm talking, I'm going to, of course, give you my little primer first. But feel free to send in questions and we'll try to get to as many as possible. If you have specific questions on cholesterol, on statins, on triglycerides, any of these kinds of things. Okay?
So how many of you have regular blood work where you you actually get it from your doctor and you're able to kind of look at it and not just go with the, oh, everything looks good. You know, how many people are kind of paying attention to that or monitoring? Right. I know there's quite a few of people I see in here that get regular blood work and are aware of kind of where they stand.
Yeah. So hi Gail, hi Donna, hi Judy.
Yep. Sally says me.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Marianne.
Right, so it's important to always get copies of your labs from your doctor so that you can kind of have a look at that afterwards and then digest it a little bit and look up things that you're interested in. And Brian says my doctor is great about blood work. That's a little plug. Thank you, Brian. Good, excellent. I'm glad to see people are involved. So we're going to just talk a little bit about what is cholesterol. Okay, so who thinks that you can get cholesterol from tomatoes? Is that an up or a down? And then who thinks, let's see if we get some answers here. Do plants have cholesterol is my question. Tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, any kind of vegetables.
Any kind of vegetable.
Okay, I'm hearing silence. I'm guessing everybody's wondering, what about animals? Do animals have cholesterol in them? Your ham, your bacon, your beef, your chicken, your eggs, do they have cholesterol in them? Yeah, so Kristen was right. Yeah, Kristen was answering from before, I think. Okay, and yeah, Brian will get to that. Okay, right. So animals are the only place you're going to get cholesterol because we make cholesterol. So if you're eating animals, you'll get that from both their meat and the fat. You will not ever get cholesterol from plants. There are other fats in plants, but not cholesterol. It's purely from animals, from the animal world, not the plant world. So that's important to understand. But our body also makes cholesterol. So if we're eating cholesterol and our body's making cholesterol, in most people there's an internal regulation that slows down how much we make if we're eating a lot of it. And we'll get into this later, but there's a little cycle that goes into your intestines that both what you make and what you eat will go into your gut. And then there's some things that you can do, both medicines that you can use as well as lifestyle adaptations that you can do that can help you maximize getting rid of cholesterol that way through your gut. So now let's talk about what cholesterol does. Okay, so this, I think a lot of people think cholesterol is just a bad thing, that we shouldn't have it, that it's just there to clog up our arteries and give us heart attacks and strokes, and that is absolutely not true. Cholesterol is really important because it lines our cells, it coats our nerves. Most of our brain is actually cholesterol and other kinds of fats. So it's super, super, super important for us to be healthy, to have enough cholesterol, right? It is possible to get too low in your cholesterol, although I'm sure those would be fighting words to a cardiologist, but to pretty much anybody else, it is possible to get too low in your cholesterol. So we need cholesterol. So why do we need it? Because it provides a very good insulation to our nerves. It's a way to kind of protect a lot of our cells. It's a way to keep things from getting out of the cells. All of our cells are what we call a phospholipid bilayer, and so you've got some little cholesterol bits stuck in there, and the outside portion is water soluble and the inside portion is more fat soluble, so that we can connect with the world and our cells can flow through our blood, which is water soluble. So it serves those functions. It also is really important for our hormones. All of our hormones, well, our sex hormones, are made from a cholesterol precursor, which is made from a vitamin D precursor. So there's 4 rings in cholesterol, and those 4 rings come from vitamin D. So you need vitamin D for you to make cholesterol, for you to make your testosterone and your estrogen and your progesterone and your cortisol. So the body is very efficient. So it takes one molecule and it makes a little tweak and it does something completely different. It makes another little tweak and it does something else completely different. So we need these molecules. They're very good for us.
So when you say vitamin D is one of the most important factors, with the most of us, or most, not me per se, actually, it's one thing I'm spot on, most of Americans being deficient in vitamin D. Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot in the things that you run of consistency there with low vitamin D impacting cholesterol?
Yeah, well, not so much actually impacting cholesterol, but because certain things are going to pull priority. So your cortisol is going to always pull priority, and your cholesterol is. So what gets short shrift then is your estrogen and your testosterone often, and yeah, so that can make some issues with libido, with sex hormone problems.
Okay.
So then one of the other major functions of cortisol is it carries triglycerides. And triglycerides, you will see that on your little panel if you see, they always measure total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, and triglycerides, and then they give you a couple of ratios. So triglycerides are come from our diet when we eat, and it's a form of energy. So that's how we get energy around the body. And if we have a lot of triglycerides, they get stored as fat, right? They get stored in our liver and our muscle and wherever else we can store it, but they're fat. But cholesterol's main job is to take the triglycerides from our diet and move it around our body and send it to the places that need that energy. So it's kind of like a little boat. So that little boat has some different molecules, and we're going to get into that later, but first I really want to just talk about what you're going to see on a regular cholesterol panel. Yeah, and if you want to pull up one, that would be good. So your total cholesterol, that number, to me, does not matter at all, and I'll tell you why. It can be super, super high, well, let's say under 400, and still not mean that you are at really increased risk from heart disease. And that's because your total cholesterol is made up of your HDL and your LDL and your triglycerides. So if your triglycerides are high, then that's going to skew things, and maybe your LDL is really not that high. And the LDL, or low density lipoprotein, is the one people say is bad, but it isn't, because we just talked about why it's not. So that low density lipoprotein, which has got the bad rap, that is one that we need, but we don't want it to be too high. If it gets too high, then we worry about it being oxidized. And oxidation is like what happens to an apple when you cut it and leave it out and it turns brown. It's what happens to your bike when you leave it out in the rain and it gets rusty. That's oxidation. And we don't want that happening to our LDL molecules, because that makes them more inflamed, more fiery. It creates those things called free radicals.
Yeah, I like to tell people, like, within your HDL and your LDL, the LDL is further broken down into its own good bad, right? Mm-hmm. So HDL is like good, LDL bad in layman's, right, conventional terms. Right. Within that LDL, you've kind of got the more preferable size than, the less desirable size. So we'll call that good and bad.
So you have a big meal, okay? Your body's breaking down your fats, and then your body packages those little fats into these, what's initially called a chylomicron, but there's no test on this afterwards. And I'm just telling you this, you can absolutely forget it, but just so you know, like there's little steps. So there's chylomicrons, which are like big little spheres of a lot of triglycerides and different fats. And then that's further broken down into VLDL, very low density lipoproteins, which are bigger. They're low density, so they're floaty, okay? Yeah, and let me just actually show them this little picture here. So you've got your VLDL, very low density lipoproteins, which are then broken down into your low density lipoproteins, which then go into just your cholesterol and HDL, and then it is escorted out of your body as HDL. So I have a little picture here. I don't know if people can see it. I know sometimes this shows up backwards, so I'm hoping that it doesn't today. But that's TG means triglyceride, and then this is your LDL, and then we've got smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, and we're going to talk about the size of these pieces. And then over here you've got your HDL, and that's how it goes out of the body. So these are what we call atherogenic. These create plaque, and these ones here are anti-atherogenic. They take away from plaque, okay? So that's kind of how the flow through your body goes. So what we want to do, okay, yeah, sorry guys, it is backwards, and I have tried every way I can think of to make my phone not be backwards. But what I'll do is I will scan it, or maybe I can snap a picture of it and put it in our dialogue after I'm finished here, so that you can have a picture of it.
Do that.
Okay. So these are particles, okay? Your low density lipoprotein, your LDL, is not just one molecule, it's a whole bunch of molecules. And that's something else that I wanted to kind of show you another picture of over here. Okay, so this is low density, and you can see that it's kind of color coded. Actually, here's another bigger picture that might be easier to see. So this is a sphere with a whole bunch of little molecules in it. The purple over here is your phospholipid bilayer, and inside the orange there is your cholesterol, and at the top is this protein called ApoB, and that is what makes up an LDL. So there's inside here, there's a whole bunch of triglycerides, then there's the cholesterol, and you've got your ApoB. So that is an LDL particle. So that piece is kind of really important to understand. It's not just one piece of cholesterol. When they're measuring your LDL-C, your LDL cholesterol, they're taking a whole bunch of these particles and they're smushing them up. So they're not measuring them individually, they're just smushing them, you know, taking it and like compacting it. That's if they even actually measure that. Most of the time, what your traditional lipid panel will be is your HDL is measured, your triglycerides are measured, and then the LDL is calculated. There's a formula, blanking on the name of it, Benwide formula. Anyways, it doesn't really matter what the name of the formula is, but it's calculated, it's not measured. And they're relying on there being a certain regular ratio between the LDL and the HDL, which does not always hold true if, in particular, if your triglycerides are high. And that's why you need to have your cholesterol done when you're fasting, because they want to make sure that your triglycerides are lower, because after you eat, they boost way up, because that's the fat from your diet being dispersed around your body. So that's why you need to be fasting.
So there's like a dramatic difference in the profile that you would see with, like, say, high cholesterol and low triglyceride than someone who might have high and high. Mm-hmm. I'm talking overall number, right? So if you're looking at a total overall number,
right,
then we dive into what the actual breakout of the LDL is.
So let's just still stay within the conventional panel here. Let's see, can you bring me down to the ratios? There we go. So then you're going to get on your regular panel your cholesterol to HDL-C. That's the high density lipoprotein C. C standing for cholesterol, meaning that they've smushed up all the high density lipoprotein, And they're measuring just that total amount, not the number of particles, not the size of those particles, but how much there is altogether.
And that's typical on any conventional
on
test?
any conventional test.
Okay.
So then your ratio becomes quite important. So you want to have a good ratio. It should be under 5 of the HDL, sorry, of the total cholesterol to your HDL. Total cholesterol to HDL should be under 5. And then the non-HDL, that's everything else that's not the HDL, you want to have, this is cardiologists, you want to have less than 130, okay? They like it less than 100, especially if you had a heart attack in the past or a stroke. They're going to want it to be even lower because their feeling is that the higher it is, the more likely it's going to create plaque. And that's true to a certain extent. But there is a big differentiator. So in your conventional panel, you're just getting the smooshed up numbers, just the total cholesterol, either the LDL or the HDL. But what we really want to know is how much of that LDL is oxidized, how much of that is kind of on fire, because that's what's going to cause your plaque, that's what's going to cause the clogging up of your arteries. Not just how much LDL, but how much is oxidized. And that's a very expensive test, and it's very rare to get that. There's only, I think, one lab that still does that because it's pretty expensive. So what we do as a marker of the oxidized LDL is your total LDL cholesterol, but it's a pretty poor marker. So that's why they go to the ratios, which is a little bit better. But if you want to get better, then you do what a lot of the cardiologists, they have been actually doing it for 20 years, the ones that are really keeping up with the research. Because this test has been around for a long time, but not a lot of insurance companies will cover it. So it may cost you $200, $250 to do it. But if you have any risk for heart disease or you want to know, it's, I think, money well spent, because this can really stratify your risk for a stroke or heart attack much better.
And what's the name of that one?
That's called an advanced lipid profile. And if you have, if you need to go to Quest, they call it a cardio IQ lipid profile. And if you go to LabCorp, they call it an NMR profile. And they're each are slightly different techniques that they use, but they're going to give us pretty similar information.
Okay.
And so what we're looking for is, because we want to see how much is oxidized, so the next best thing to oxidized LDL is to find out how many particles of LDL there are and how big or small they are, okay? Because it's the small, dense ones that are going to create your plaque. Those small, dense ones are the ones that are oxidized.
This is the whole marble versus cotton ball,
right?
So you think of like a big fluffy cotton ball versus a real dense, solid, heavyweight marble.
Right.
So that's how I envision it.
And going back to the picture, then I think actually Leslie already...
I tried to, well, let me post a picture, but...
Okay, well, we'll do it in a little bit. But right here, you've got your bigger LDL, and here you've got your smaller LDL. And so you don't want the small LDL. We want the little, we want the big, fluffy marshmallow or cotton ball, right? We want them big and bouncy, because then they just kind of float around your blood vessels and they don't crash into the blood vessel wall and they don't get in between the cells, which the small, dense ones will go and kind of push their way through and get snuggled up into those cells, and then that starts to create inflammation and plaque, and then it gets thicker, 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 and all of a sudden your blood vessel, which was nice and round, now all of a sudden has got, you know, half of it's plugged up, so you're not getting as much flow. So you want the big fluffy ones.
Yeah, and I like, so for instance, when you have a higher cholesterol number, so in this case it's 253 is the total number. The LDL was 145. The HDL is 93. So the HDL you want to be over 50. So you want it to be in that higher range.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So then the triglycerides are low, so 55. So that would take your eyes away from the dangers there.
Right.
But then you see the LDL 145, right? So
right.
All right, red flag. What does that mean? So then you further break it down, and we look here and see. This is where you get into the particles. This happens to be a cardio IQ.
Yeah, but they're giving you the conventional within that.
Okay.
So that's your conventional right there. So the conventional is where the LDL cholesterol is 145. So that's higher than your cardiologist wants it. They want it between 100 and 130 if you've never had any heart disease. They want it under 100 if you have. We'll talk about what I really look for, but I want to tell you what the standard that is expected out there. So that's the numbers you're looking at. And just for reference, it used to be that the where the cardiologists wanted it was under 160, but they're tightening down, and because they're still seeing heart attacks and strokes out there. And if all they have to work with is this conventional blood test, which really doesn't accurately reflect your oxidized LDL, I can't blame them for, trying to make that number as small as possible. But I think they need to kind of get out there and really petition for insurance companies to cover the more telling tests that can really stratify your risk better. And then they wouldn't worry about it being so darn low. So 145 of a total LDL cholesterol, we want to know how many actual particles make up that 145, okay? Mm-hmm. So the example is if, so with this particular test that we're looking at, this person has 1,500 particles, okay? And they are the big fluffy particles. So 1,500 is still higher. We'd like it to be around 1,000 of the particles. And that's why her LDL total cholesterol is 145. I hope I'm not losing you. But her in the conventional world, her LDL cholesterol is 145. In the advanced test, the LDL particle number is 1,500. Both are too high, okay? But we can see that the particle number, we can see better that these are lots of particles, but we want to know, are they big particles or are they small? The big ones are called type A, and the little ones are called type B. So in this particular case, yes, so in this particular case, she has type A, and you can see here, you've got a lot of big particles that carry that 145, or you can have even more smaller, dense ones. So we like, this is better, this is more risk, because they're small and dense and there's a lot more of them. So we want less, and we want them to carry that cholesterol, so we want them to be bigger, okay? So just think of this, the analogy I like to use is buses on the road or cars on the road. So if you've got 1,500 cars on the road, those are the small, dense LDL particles. If you've got 1,500, they're gonna go around, jog around, crash into each other, crash into the boundaries. There's gonna be a lot of accidents. But if you put those 1,500 people that are in each of those cars, you put them on, say, 100 buses, now you don't have as many particles, they're big, they're gonna go down the road, there's not gonna be as much traffic, they're not gonna crash into each other. So you want the big buses and you want less of them. They can carry the same amount, but you want them to be bigger and the fluffier.
That makes sense.
Okay?
Makes sense, yeah.
And that then reflects how oxidized that LDL is, because once it gets oxidized, it goes into little small bits. Once it's oxidized, you're gonna have the small ones. So we don't want the small ones. We don't want the B, okay? I think I've hammered that one to death. So HDL, just to give you a little bit of information on it, your HDL, that is the good guy. Again, good, because we want to have plenty of that. We want to have lots of that, actually, because it takes your cholesterol out of your body, okay?
Does that offset the LDL at all? Like some people say, oh, because my HDL is high, like I'm kind of, even if my LDL is a little high, because my HDL is high too, my total cholesterol is a little higher, it's okay.
So if your total cholesterol is high because you got super high HDL, but your LDL is normal, that's okay, because that's why I don't really worry about total cholesterol. I really want to know what your HDL, and I want to know what your LDL particle number is. Yeah. I want to know how big or small they are. So the HDL is super important. That is an independent positive. It decreases your risk. So if you have got a high LDL, but you've also got a high HDL, they kind of cross each other out. If you've got a normal LDL and a high HDL, then you've got much decreased risk.
Okay. We've got a couple questions here, actually. So Cheryl says, what are the differences in looking at this in men versus women? Also, is it good to take the statin so your numbers is 90 or not? Okay. Great questions.
And she asked, too, about the thyroid. If you have a thyroid issue, it said that your cholesterol will always be high. No. If your thyroid's not balanced, your cholesterol will be high. And that, I don't worry about people's cholesterol until I get their nutrition balanced, their thyroid balanced. I get them pooping and doing all the good things that they need to do, and then I start to look into your cholesterol, because that's going to be affected by a lot of those things. But you can be on thyroid medication and have a very healthy LDL and HDL level.
And Macarena asks, so you can only know the size of the LDL with the advanced lipid panel?
Correct.
That's correct.
That's
right?
the only way you can find it out.
And that was through Quest or LabCorp, right?
Right.
Okay. And then as far as men versus women, and then the statin's a great question, because that is something we wanted to cover. So we'll
Sure.
definitely throw that in.
We will. So I'm going to talk fast.
Yeah, talk about the men versus women, and then I'll
So
touch on the
there
statins.
isn't a huge difference. I mean, they allow a little bit higher cholesterol in a man than a woman, but the same theory applies. So you still want it to be type A, and you still want them to be lower particle numbers. You don't want them to be oxidized. But they will give the men a little bit higher numbers than the women, just generally because of size, right?
Yeah.
And children will have different numbers. So now there is, I want to touch on this because I know that this is important for some people. There is something called familial hyperlipidemia. Hyper means high, lipid is the fats, and emia means in your blood. So from the family, in other words, a genetic tendency for high cholesterol in your blood. And that can be a big problem. And typically that's because, I didn't go into this too much at the beginning, but in that disease, you don't have a receptor on your liver that pulls your LDL out of the blood and gets rid of it. So normally you and I will, it's going to flow through the body, goes through the liver grabs it with the receptors, and then it puts it out in your bile and in your poop. When you have familial hyperlipidemia, you don't have those working receptors, and so it just keeps on building up and up and up, and it's really hard to get out of your body, so you can get very high blood levels.
Is that done in a genetic testing, or is that the APOE, or is that the...
No, that's a completely different receptor.
Okay.
So that's not done on that, yeah.
How do you know if you have...
If you've got like an LDL that's like 400 or 500, you probably have it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's kind of obvious, like it's something you'd follow.
Right, you're not going to have an LDL of 145 and have that. It's going to be super high.
Yeah.
But they've got, it's important because some people are going to have super high cholesterol no matter how good they eat, they exercise, and these of course are things that are important. Having a diet that's high in your fiber in particular, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but high in fiber. And your meats, your animal proteins you can have, generally most people can tolerate that as long as they're getting plenty of the fiber. That's the nuts, the seeds, your vegetables, the peels of fruits and vegetables. So you can usually tolerate that as long as you're getting enough fiber. If you're not eating fiber and you're just having your meat and your potatoes, then you might get stuck having particularly high cholesterol levels, and then your doctor may say, well, cut back on what you're eating.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too, the American Dietary Association just noted within the last few years that cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern. So it went from like, oh my gosh, cholesterol, to yeah, we're not really looking at that much anymore. And to your point, it's not the same, what you eat is not the same as, like, it's like eating fat makes you fat. It's
Right.
not that,
It's
right?
not that,
Your body is going to even out and produce whatever it needs to, regardless of what you're putting in, right?
For most people,
To the certain extent. And then what you said, meat and potatoes, carbs and sugar will dramatically impact your LDL. So if you shift the thinking from the
Right.
traditional, the meats and the fats and things like that, and recognize that some of the biggest problems associated with these dense particles are your carbohydrates and the high sugar levels that people are running.
Right, because remember, the cholesterol is a boat that's carrying your triglycerides around. So if you've got a lot of triglycerides, so it's got 3 sugar parts to it. So if you have a diet that's very high in your sugars, you're gonna put up your triglycerides and you're gonna increase your cholesterol to carry these little guys around. Okay.
Yeah, so it's that's I love your analogies tonight. but this, to the statin point, you know, we talked about before, like, when do you make those recommendations and when it's appropriate and when it's not. It is important to note some of the side effects of statin drugs, to understand some of the vitamins that it will deplete going on it, and some of the other research that supports its potential to cause some diabetes and other factors. So there's a lot of things to consider before you take that step and before you make that
and
decision.
You can always, some of the first things you can do are look at your fiber intake. And let me now take 1 minute to tell you why fiber is good, because I'm always pumping fiber, okay? Because fiber is something that when you're eating it, okay, I remember I told you that whatever your body makes, as well as whatever you eat, goes into your GI tract, into your gut. So when that goes into your gut, it's going to bind to the fiber. If you've got fiber in there, it binds it and you poop it out, okay? It's the best way to get rid of it. If you're not having a very high fiber diet, it doesn't do that, it just gets reabsorbed. So fiber can be your great friend, and that's why doctors generally will tell you to have a very high fiber diet to really increase your nuts and seeds and your vegetables. There are also medicines that can bind. So cholestyramine is a medicine that some people will take for their high cholesterol, and that's a binder. It's a resin. So it binds to the cholesterol and helps you...
Like lipid cert?
Poop it out. No, Welchol.
Okay.
And so there's some ones that do that. Statins, what statins do, because somebody was asking a question, they are what we call an HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor. Say that 3 times fast. So there's a step that is in making the cholesterol from your vitamin D, and that blocks that step so that you make less, okay? And they work very well. I think one of their other attributes, and probably one of the main ways that they actually really work, is that they're anti-inflammatory. But they can have other potential side effects. They can give you increased muscle enzymes. They can damage your muscles and give you a lot of pain and aches. We're seeing that there's an increased risk of diabetes. I think the most recent numbers I saw was about a 12% increase risk of diabetes. So not huge, but there, especially if you don't address your diet first and you just choose to take a statin to deal with it and you want to just go and eat your burger and your bacon, then you have a real potential of problems. So
what about the CoQ10?
So the statins also inhibit your body's ability to make CoQ10. So if you do take a statin, then you want to make sure you're taking at least 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams of CoQ10 with that. And so just kind of doing your due diligence and knowing where you're at. If you're already on a statin, don't stop it abruptly. Make sure you're really working on your diet. Get your numbers as good as possible. I haven't even started talking about the inflammatory markers that are also part of that advanced lipid profile. So you want your inflammatory markers down, you want your blood pressure down, you want your fiber up, you want to be exercising. Then if your numbers look beautiful, you can talk to your doctor about decreasing the statin slowly and watch your cholesterol as you do that. And if it's jumping way up, especially if you've got type B or you've got high particle numbers, and the number, in general, we want to see around 1,000 for the particle numbers, 1,000 or less. I think the actual number with Quest is 1,050, but you'll get it on your panel. It'll come up on your panel when you do it.
Yeah, there are different ranges for different panels.
Yeah, different labs will have different ranges, so you can't just go by that number I said. You have to look at the lab that you get it done in. So looking at those things and looking at the statins and looking at other medicines that you can do, but remembering that there's a couple key things that you can do before you even start taking those things. So we've talked about diet and fiber. We've talked about exercise. Exercise is huge in getting your particles to be type A and to getting your HDL to be a higher number. Okay, so exercise, getting out there 5 days a week, 45 minutes to an hour, and getting that cardio in as well as a little bit of weight training can make a big difference in your cholesterol. The other thing that can make a big difference is omega-3 fatty acids, your fish oil. And so those will also move your type B, the small dense ones, to make them into the big fluffy ones by having more fish or fish oil in your diet. Okay? But if you're doing fish, you want to make sure, because there's always pros and cons, you want to make sure you're not getting the big fish, not the tuna, the swordfish, the mahi-mahi. Those have a lot of mercury in them. So you want to make sure that you're getting the smaller fish with less mercury. And if you take a fish oil, absolutely make sure that they say on the bottle or on their website that they have ultra filtered it of the mercury, because many companies do not, and then you get a little mercury with your omega-3s, which is not healthy. That's not going to help you.
I'm having trouble seeing this one question here. So,
Okay.
have there been studies comparing women to men in heart attacks and non-heart attacks taking medication or not taking it, i.e. statins?
So with statins, I think I know what you're talking about. So with statins, they are something that's definitely encouraged by your cardiologist to take if you've had a heart attack. That's called secondary prevention. That is where you're trying to prevent another heart attack. You've already had one. So in that, the men and women seem to both do well with the statin in terms of decreasing their risk of future heart attacks. For primary prevention, if you've never had a heart attack before, you're just worried about it, the numbers are less convincing. And so for men, still looks like it's probably pretty good to take a statin if you can't get it down with all these other things I've talked about. But for women, less convincing. So there's more people you need to treat to actually save one life, to prevent one heart attack. So it's still less convincing. And there are herbal alternatives, right? There's red yeast rice, there's bergamot, there's a variety of other things that you can use in the herbal world that kind of help to shift those numbers. So there's lots that can be done, but I wanted you to just kind of understand how to read your conventional lipid profile and to ask your doctor for an advanced lipid profile, especially if you already have an abnormal traditional one. You've got some power behind you to try to ask for the advanced one and look for inflammatory markers. Okay?
Awesome.
So go ahead and what omega-3 do I recommend? Just check your labels. There's a lot of good ones that are out there, but you just really want to make sure that you don't have that mercury in it. I use Zymogen's Monopure. Designs for Health has a great one. Nordic Naturals has a good one, but you're really just looking to make sure that you're getting enough of the two components, DHA and EPA, and you want about 1,000 milligrams per capsule, or if they're smaller capsules, you just have to take more. And generally, you're going to take 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day if you've got high cholesterol. Sometimes you need more. Vasepa is a prescription version of the omega-3s, and that is about 1,000 milligrams per capsule, but they're usually using 2 to 4 capsules a day. So
and most fish oils come in like containers that prevent from oxidation in terms of transit.
Color.
So you don't want to get rancid fish oils. So you'll see they're in white bottles or just not clear like you would see some of the others. So make sure they're protected from light.
Yeah, absolutely, and temperature too. And you want to just understand too that the fish oil, the thing that they're going to help the most is going to be your triglycerides. But because cholesterol carries your triglycerides around, it's going to also help your cholesterol ultimately. And of course, cleaning up your diet. And bergamot is one that I really like for an herbal recipe or a remedy, bergamot. It comes from a flower. And then red yeast rice. And that's not a yeast and it's not a rice, but it's a
RYR is sometimes what
it
it's
comes
called.
from those. It comes from a yeast that grows on a rice, but it's not the yeast. So they just extract this chemical, which acts much like a statin. Okay,
very
good
cool.
questions, guys.
Yes,
Awesome.
Thank you for interacting. That was great. Any questions we might have missed, we'll go through
and we'll try to upload some of my little pictures so you can kind of have a better idea.
Yeah, these definitely get a visual for you.
It's hard. It's hard to kind of conceptualize what these little things are that are floating
The
around
bus
your
thing
system.
is really good. The whole people on the bus. Like, take all those people out of the little cars and throw them on the bus.
You don't want the little cars. You want
same
the big
amount
buses.
of people.
Right.
But yeah, because that to me is pretty clear when you look at this little honker. Do you see all those teeny people in the LDL?
Yeah.
All of those guys, so it's interesting.
We want the big fluffy guys. Anyways, to that end, go out, exercise, have some fish, drink a lot of water.
Get a bigger breakout of your
and
panel.
have half your plate veggies. Eat lots and lots and lots of veggies.
Lots of veggies.
Even if you're keto, do the veggies, right? You don't do the simple carbs, but you need those veggies. Okay? Especially because I see too many people doing keto who are not taking, very few vegetables at all.
Yeah.
And then their cholesterol goes way up. And that's also not good because it usually goes hand in hand with inflammation. So just, I look forward to talking to you guys, working with you guys next week when we'll have another interesting topic.
Yes, fantastic. We haven't decided yet, so if you guys come up with one in the next day or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Have a great night.
And remember, feel free to share this with those that you love that you think might benefit from this information.
Yeah, definitely pull out those panels and ask the questions.
Yeah.
Ask the questions.
Ask the questions. You got it. Take care,
Have a
guys.
good night.
Good night.
Bye.